Mainstream media networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC are running a highly synchronized distraction campaign against the American public. They direct your attention toward the latest Supreme Court rulings. They direct your attention toward the fiery press briefings happening right now in Washington. They direct your attention toward the endless political theater broadcasting across the globe. They are intentionally hiding your own money from you. President Donald Trump just bypassed the traditional press corps to expose a massive financial blind spot deliberately maintained by the Internal Revenue Service. The sitting president did not announce a new tariff. He did not announce a major foreign policy shift. President Trump specifically identified 5 highly obscure tax forms. These are 5 specific pieces of paper that the federal bureaucracy has quietly kept out of the public eye for several decades. Every single American citizen born before 1971 is currently bleeding thousands of dollars every single month because they simply do not know these 5 documents exist. The Internal Revenue Service relies entirely on your continued silence. They rely on your absolute trust in standard tax preparation professionals who intentionally skip these exact forms to save time. The current administration has laid the documents out on the open table, effectively weaponizing the tax code to return your wealth, but the window to act is violently closing. The absolute deadline to reclaim this legally protected cash is June 30th. There are no extensions available. There are no grace periods granted. There are no secondary appeals allowed by the federal government. Millions of retirees and seniors living everywhere from California to Alabama are walking blindly past their own wealth. The financial system is passively draining your retirement accounts right this very second, and the corporate media absolutely refuses to broadcast the solution. It happened at exactly 8:14 in the evening on Tuesday. President Donald Trump stepped out of the standard briefing room protocol, bypassed the teleprompter, and directly addressed a glaring financial discrepancy within the Internal Revenue Service. He did not talk about foreign policy. He did not talk about the Supreme Court rulings. He did not talk about the upcoming legislative battles. He held up a plain white folder containing exactly 5 documents. These were not classified intelligence briefings. These were tax forms. They were 5 specific administrative forms that the Treasury Department has kept buried under layers of bureaucratic red tape for decades. The sitting president looked directly into the camera and named them, effectively detonating a financial bomb under the passive wealth extraction system that currently dominates the federal government. Look at the contrast in that room. You have the President of the United States actively weaponizing the tax code to push money back into the pockets of older Americans. On the other side, you have the career bureaucrats, the legacy media executives, and the institutional financial advisors standing in absolute terrified silence. The major television networks cut away. The morning newspapers buried the statement on page 17. The financial pundit class immediately shifted the conversation back to the stock market index. They panicked. They panicked because President Trump exposed the exact mechanism they used to silently drain your retirement funds. At 8:22 in the evening, just 8 minutes after the president named these forms, search traffic on the Internal Revenue Service website crashed the servers. Millions of older Americans simultaneously realized they had been feeding a machine designed to take their money without asking. The federal government has known about this for years. The certified public accountants have known about this for years. The massive corporate tax preparation software companies have known about this for years. They chose to say nothing. The administration has now forced the issue into the light, but knowing the truth is only the first step. The system is currently working overtime to run out the clock. The Treasury Department knows that if they can just keep you distracted until the deadline passes, they keep the money. They keep your money. They keep the money of every single citizen born before 1971 who fails to file these 5 specific forms by the end of June 30th. The television anchors want you to focus on the noise. The political strategists want you to focus on the anger. The financial institutions want you to focus on the fear. They are trying to run out the clock. President Trump handed you the map to your own vault. The system is betting everything on the assumption that you will simply be too distracted to turn the key. The deadline is absolute. The money is real. The silence from the establishment is entirely intentional. The clock is ticking. To understand the sheer magnitude of President Donald Trump's announcement, you have to look backward. You have to look away from the current political theater happening in Washington. You have to rewind the tape to the major legislative tax code overhauls of the 1980s and the 1990s. During those specific decades, the congressional committees and the Treasury Department fundamentally changed how wealth moves across the United States. They did not create a system of direct financial confiscation. Direct confiscation causes public riots. Direct confiscation causes immediate political revolutions. Direct confiscation wakes people up from their slumber. Instead, the political class created something far more sophisticated and infinitely more dangerous. They created a passive wealth extraction machine designed specifically to target the aging middle class. The Internal Revenue Service does not send armed federal agents to take your retirement money. They absolutely do not need to. The entire federal tax system is meticulously engineered to rely entirely on your lack of specialized legal knowledge. When a citizen born before 1971 fills out standard yearly tax paperwork, the computerized system automatically defaults to the highest possible withholding rates. When you miss the specific legal deductions designed exclusively for older Americans, the Internal Revenue Service does not call your house in Florida or your apartment in Texas to correct your honest mistake. They simply accept your massive overpayment. They quietly cash the check. They freeze the surplus funds in a Federal Reserve account. You unwittingly give the federal government a 0% interest loan funded directly by your hard-earned pension, your monthly Social Security check, and your individual retirement account. You pay a certified public accountant to protect you from this exact scenario. You pay massive commercial tax software corporations to guide you safely through the legal maze. But those financial professionals are deeply embedded in the exact same ecosystem. A standard local tax preparer does not get paid extra money to spend 2 hours hunting down 5 obscure, zero-cost administrative forms that legally reduce your tax burden. They get paid for sheer volume. They get paid to push your financial paperwork through the federal system as fast as humanly possible. If your accountant skips the specialized senior forms, they face absolutely zero legal consequences from the government. You are the only person in the equation who loses money. The tax professional keeps their processing fee. The federal government keeps your surplus cash. You permanently lose your financial security. This dynamic is not an accidental oversight. This is the intended, deliberate design of the American bureaucracy. For several decades, the permanent political establishment in Washington has quietly relied on this exact hidden pool of unclaimed civilian money. They use the billions of dollars in overpaid senior taxes to secretly paper over massive federal budget deficits. They use your frozen retirement wealth to artificially inflate the federal Treasury balance sheet. The establishment counts on the fact that older Americans have been conditioned their entire lives to fear the Internal Revenue Service. They count on you signing wherever the accountant tells you to sign. When President Trump stood at the podium and named those 5 specific documents, he did not just offer generic financial advice. He launched a direct, calculated strike against the hidden funding mechanism of the permanent bureaucratic state. He took the leverage away from the federal agencies and handed the weapon directly back to the citizens. The fundamental rules of the bureaucratic game are devastatingly simple. The federal tax code heavily rewards legal complexity. The federal tax code brutally punishes civilian passivity. The government does not actively steal the retirement funds from the elderly population. The system simply profits from your silence. Look directly at the actual mathematics. Look directly at the raw federal data. Look directly at the exact financial receipts the establishment desperately wants to keep buried. In the fiscal year of 2023, the Internal Revenue Service collected billions of dollars in excess tax payments from citizens over the age of 65. This is not a mathematical rounding error. This is a deliberate structural wealth transfer. When President Donald Trump stood at the podium and exposed those 5 specific forms, he did not just give you casual financial advice. He triggered the absolute largest legal bank run in the history of the United States federal government. For over 4 decades, the political establishment relied entirely on your silence. They built massive federal budgets based on the exact assumption that you would never file Form W-4P to stop the automatic maximum tax withholding on your hard-earned pension. They funded endless bureaucratic expansions, assuming you would never submit Form 1040-SR, the specialized senior tax return that blocks the government from silently seizing your standard deductions. The federal machine became completely dependent on this invisible passive revenue stream. The political class used your overpayments as a permanent, zero-interest federal slush fund. Now, that very weapon has boomeranged directly back into their faces. The panic inside the Treasury Department is currently palpable. If even 10% of the American citizens born before 1971 file Form SSA 44 before the June 30th deadline, the federal government will be legally forced to return billions of dollars in Medicare premium surcharges. The money must legally leave the federal Treasury. The money must return to the personal checking accounts of senior citizens living in Ohio, living in Pennsylvania, and living in Michigan. The establishment counted on your absolute ignorance, and the sitting president just handed you the exact legal mechanism to dismantle their entire assumption. You might believe your highly paid tax professional will protect you. You might believe the massive corporate tax preparation firms operating in New York or California have your best financial interests in mind. They absolutely do not. The certified public accountants are an integral functioning part of this exact same passive extraction system. A corporate tax preparer charges you a flat fee to process your standard paperwork. They receive absolutely zero financial bonuses for taking the extra time to file Form 8606, the document that actively prevents the Internal Revenue Service from taxing your individual retirement account money twice. They push your paperwork through the computer system, collect their corporate fee, and leave you completely exposed to the massive federal bureaucracy. They sold you out for speed. They sold you out for convenience. They sold you out to maintain their own profit margins. At exactly 9:30 in the morning on the day following the announcement from the president, the major corporate tax preparation companies held emergency internal conference calls. The corporate directives were explicitly clear. Do not actively bring up the 5 senior tax forms unless the client explicitly demands them by their specific name. The commercial tax software algorithms remain intentionally unpatched today. If you do not specifically fight through the menus to trigger the senior deduction protocols, the computer defaults to the highest possible tax extraction model. The entire financial services industry formed a unified, impenetrable wall of silence. President Trump broke the unspoken rule of Washington by speaking the quiet part completely out loud. He armed the aging middle class with the exact paperwork required to drain the federal system of its passive funding. They are terrified of you. If you are watching this broadcast right now and you or your parents were born before 1971, you need to stop whatever you are doing. Look at your bank account. Look at your monthly pension statement. Look at your Social Security deposit. You are actively bleeding financial resources every single 30 days. You are not losing this money to inflation. You are not losing this money to stock market fluctuations. You are losing this money because the Internal Revenue Service built a completely legal trapdoor directly under your personal checking account. President Donald Trump just pointed directly at the first 2 weapons, Form W-4P and Form W-4V. These are your immediate cash flow triggers. When you receive your monthly pension or your individual retirement account distribution, the federal computer system automatically defaults to withholding the absolute maximum amount of federal income tax. It takes your money first. It asks questions later. If you do not actively file Form W-4P, you are essentially giving the United States Treasury a massive 0% interest loan for 12 consecutive months. Form W-4V does the exact same thing to your Social Security benefits. The government holds your wealth hostage until April, allowing inflation to silently destroy its purchasing power. Submitting these 2 pieces of paper immediately stops the bleeding. It forces the system to calculate your actual legal tax bracket and leaves the remaining cash exactly where it belongs, in your own pocket. Then we move to the ultimate senior shield. Form 1040-SR. Millions of older Americans use standard corporate tax software or standard strip mall accountants to file their annual returns. What they do not tell you is that the standard Form 1040 is intentionally designed for a 30-year-old corporate employee. It actively buries the massive standard deductions specifically created by law for citizens over the age of 65. Form 1040-SR forces the Internal Revenue Service to calculate your taxes using the legal senior citizen brackets. The commercial software algorithms will intentionally hide this specialized document unless you specifically demand it. They know you will not ask. But the financial extraction gets even more malicious. Enter Form 8606. This is your only legal salvation from double taxation. Over your entire working career, you likely contributed after-tax dollars into a traditional individual retirement account. You already paid federal income tax on that money. But when you turn 72 and begin taking your required minimum distributions, the Internal Revenue Service experiences a sudden, highly convenient case of amnesia. If you do not have Form 8606 perfectly filed, the federal government treats every single dollar as brand new income. They tax your money when you earn it. They tax your money when you save it. They tax your money when you finally withdraw it. President Trump exposed this as nothing short of legalized theft. Finally, we reach the nuclear option. Form SSA 44. If you only remember one thing from this entire broadcast, remember this exact document. The federal government uses a program called the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount to calculate your Medicare Part B premiums. But they do not use your current retirement income. They look backward. They look at your peak earning years from exactly 2 years ago to violently artificially inflate your current medical premiums. You could be living on a meager $30,000 a year right now in Florida, but paying Medicare premiums based on the $150,000 you earned before you retired. Form SSA 44 is a life-changing event appeal. It legally forces the Social Security Administration to drop your premiums back down to reality. It saves thousands of dollars overnight. The price of groceries in places like California and Texas is skyrocketing. The price of gasoline is entirely unpredictable. Your retirement accounts are under constant assault. The political establishment wants you to believe that financial salvation comes from Washington policy changes that take decades to implement. That is a lie. Real financial survival comes from weaponizing their own bureaucracy against them. Missing the June 30th deadline is not just a clerical error. It is voluntary financial surrender. The calendar flips to July 1st, 2026. The absolute worst-case scenario unfolds exactly as the establishment planned. You do nothing. Millions of citizens born before 1971 do nothing. The Internal Revenue Service permanently locks down the billions of dollars currently sitting in their passive Federal Reserve accounts. You permanently lose your legal Medicare premium adjustments. You permanently lose your monthly pension overpayments. The system swallows your hard-earned wealth without firing a single shot. The second scenario is the mathematical probability. A small, hyper-aware fraction of the aging population actively responds. The specific viewers of this broadcast immediately download Form SSA 44 and Form 1040-SR. You completely bypass the massive corporate tax preparation software companies. You secure your personal wealth before the absolute June 30th deadline. You successfully recover thousands of dollars for your own family, while the vast majority of older Americans continue funding the federal bureaucracy through their sheer, unguided ignorance. The system bleeds slightly, but the massive machine survives. The third scenario is the absolute worst nightmare of the federal establishment. A massive, unified financial awakening occurs within the next 19 days. Millions of retirees file Form W-4P and Form W-4V simultaneously. Millions of older citizens legally rip their money out of the federal overpayment accounts at the exact same moment. The United States Treasury faces an unprecedented, completely legal liquidity shock. The permanent political class in Washington suddenly loses their 0% interest slush fund overnight. President Donald Trump bet his political capital on this exact scenario when he explicitly laid the physical documents on the table. The federal bureaucracy did not design these 5 specific tax forms to generously hand money back to the American working class. The Treasury Department designed these administrative documents as an intentional obstacle course to test your financial endurance. They built a bureaucratic maze to test your absolute resolve. Hope is not a viable tax strategy. Waiting for the Internal Revenue Service to call your house and apologize for taking too much money is a financial death sentence. The federal system operates on cold, calculated, passive extraction mechanics. You must operate with the exact same cold, calculated mechanics to legally defeat it. On the morning of July 1st, 2026, you will immediately fall into one of 2 distinct categories. You will stand as a citizen who successfully weaponized the federal tax code to reclaim your legally protected property. Or you will stand as a willing victim who actively financed the exact same bloated bureaucracy you loudly complain about every single day. Look directly at the calendar. Look directly at your retirement accounts. Leave a comment below detailing exactly how much money the federal government has quietly drained from your accounts over the last decade. Send this broadcast directly to every single person you know who was born before 1971. The deadline is final.